Hey guys, my name is Jay Zephyrin. Some of you may know me as Pearl on Twitter on the Goblin Artisans Magic Design blog. I've been making magic cards fairly seriously since the second grade designer search, and I recently decided to start doing some video essays on how to go about designing magic cards. My first crack at this is going to be a little longer than usual, and it's going to assume that you have some of the basics under your belt, but I'll probably go into more depth on some of those in a later video. Today I'm going to be going through how to create a batch of about 15 to 20 commons in a single color when filling out a design skeleton. Now I'm doing this in response to a world building challenge for a set called Castmire. That's being built on the Beacon of Creation Magic Design podcast hosted by Bradley Rose and Adam Victor Kresh. They're awesome dudes. It's a fantastic project, and I highly recommend you check out the podcast, check out all the work they've been doing on this set design. It's shaping up to be something amazing, and they're just wrapping up the commons. They're working on finishing the uncommons. Definitely worth checking out, and if you're looking to dive into some set design, they're always looking for some help, for some new projects, some new designs for it. Definitely worth looking into. You can check out the links below. They do on their podcast a couple of design challenges each week. A few weeks ago, they put out a call for design submissions for as many commons in a color, however many you want. I love these kinds of challenges. I submitted a batch of green commons, and then I submitted a batch of blue commons because I can't stop designing magic cards. The most recent episode that went live on Friday, they went through all the submissions so far, and didn't look like anybody had submitted any red commons. So I just figured, okay, I'll make a quick batch of red commons for that, and that would be a good overlap for this video. Before we dive in, there's a couple of resources I want to highlight. First and foremost, Mechanical Colorpie 2017. If you're going to design magic cards, this document is your Bible. Mark Rosewater ran through nearly every mechanic R&D uses with any regularity and tells you what color it appears in, how often, and at what rarities. I'll be using a version of it that I've formatted for my own purposes on the screen, but the link to the actual article's down below. I may or may not make my version available if people want to see it. All it is just made nicer in a Word document. Not much else to it. The second resource you're going to want to use is a blank design skeleton. Reuben Covington had one up for a number of years, got a little outdated. A guy by the name of Simon Williamson over on the Custom Magic Discord has a great one floating around. I'll link to that below as well. Once we come up with card concepts, this is going to help us start to attach numbers to our favorite concepts, as well as to help spot any important card archetypes that we may have overlooked. The one more document they'll be looking at is similar to the design skeleton. This one's actually just a checklist of frequently used card archetypes put together by Adam Victor Kresh, along with how many times those abilities have been used in the last 5 or so large sets. Documents like this really help us kind of follow the design trajectories that R&D takes. Once I have those resources open and available, we're ready to begin. Now, as of this recording, Castmire has 5 named mechanics. None of them are new. The set's noir-inspired, and the plane is entirely set on this kind of spooky mansion, this haunted mansion, and that's the entire plane. It's just a mansion and the grounds around it. It's not a big plane, and it's very kind of consolidated. It's a cool concept. Again, check it out. It's awesome. The mechanics that they're looking at least at this point, are Investigate from Shadows over Innistrad, Gates from the Return to Ravnica block, Shadow from Tempest and Time Spiral blocks, Detain from the Return to Ravnica block, and Haunt from Guild Pact. Those 5 mechanics are what they've been working with so far. As of this week, they're going to probably drop one of them. They may replace it with a new one. They're still trying to figure all that out. But for right now, while we're making our red commons, those are the 5 mechanics we're going to work with. Now, they divided up those mechanics so that each of our colors has access to 3 of them. So the 3 mechanics that we're going to be focusing in on for our red commons are going to be Haunt, Gates, and Investigate. Now, that's the work that they've done on their side, and they've really left kind of design decisions open to their audience. So when I'm doing things like this, I like figuring out what each color is doing with a particular named mechanic. So I want my red cards that interact with Haunt to be very different from the green and white. Well, not very different, but different from the green and white cards that interact with Haunt. So I have a list over to the side that I made up quickly. It doesn't have anything to do with what Adam and Brad are planning. It's just a list I made up for myself that how I would kind of divide the mechanical space for each of these mechanics. And when I start going through my list of mechanics, that's when I'll kind of go a little bit in depth as to what I envision each of the colors doing with the mechanics we talked about. I know this is a ton of preliminary material, but it really helps to go into this type of design organized. Making commons can be difficult, particularly because they're not especially exciting on their own. But thinking about how the set can do its own take on these types of mechanics that show up at common in each and every set really helps us focus in, and approaching the exercise like this can really push your design along when you get stuck. So the very last thing we need to do is just remind ourselves what it is we're doing here, which is making it commons. Simplicity is absolutely the name of the game here. Every card should be doing no more than one thing. We're going to be doing everything we can to keep our complexity down. Our rules text should be at a minimum. We should be avoiding comprehension complexity. We should be avoiding board complexity. There's some space for it, and some of these mechanics are going to demand that we use that space. But we're going to really try to keep that stuff as low as we can. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of New World Order and red flagging and all of that right now. I'm just going to be going through making these commons, but it's something that we need to be aware of while we're making this. All right, so now that we've gotten all that preliminary material out of the way, we're ready to start. As you can see, I have my mechanical color pie article loaded, and I've got a little bit of a blank document over to the right that we're going to be just doing card concepts on. Now we're doing this in two stages. The first stage is we're just doing concepts. We're saying I'm going to want a card that does X, Y, and Z. I'm not caring about what costs. I'm not caring about what its power and toughness are. I'm probably not caring about what it costs to activate an ability, things like that. I'm just getting the basic concept down. So with this project, my goal is probably going to be to create something like I'm aiming for about 15 cards. It's not necessarily enough to fill out the entire common skeleton, but it's enough to kind of take us through this exercise. I know Adam and Bradley, they're doing their own thing. They've gotten other submissions, both from this exercise, from a number of previous design challenges. That's going to give them the last little push for their card to fill out the design skeleton at common. So I'm really looking to do about 15 cards. I'm going to say about 8 creatures, 7 non-creatures. Those numbers are pretty much what every color gets at a bare minimum. Red typically gets about, 53% of its commons are creatures. I think that's the official number. When you're dealing with 18 cards, it's going to come out to about 9 and 9, but more often than not, it's going to be 10 creatures, 8 spells. Again, we're going to be making 15. We're going to be making 8 creatures, 7 non-creatures. All right. So with that out of the way, we have 3 mechanics that we're going to be wanting to design to, and I covered this a little bit earlier. We're going to be doing investigate, we're going to be doing gates, and we're going to be doing investigate, gates, and it's not detain, is it? I have it written down somewhere. Just give me 1 second. Investigate, gates, and haunt. Oh, red gets haunt. Excellent. All right. So I have written down. I mentioned I plan out what each color is going to be doing mechanically with those things. So I'm just going to put this on the side over here because it's important to note. So haunt. I decided that red, unlike white and green, is going to actually want to haunt your opponent's creatures and going to want to punish things for being your opponent's things for being haunted. So haunt opponent's things, hurt haunted things. So unlike green and white, it's going to probably not reward you for having haunted creatures. Um, so that's one of the things we're going to be doing with haunt, and probably where all of our mechanical focus in red's going to be. The next thing, next mechanic was investigate. I decided that red is going to generally want to sacrifice artifacts. It's something that red has played with before in the past, plays very well with. The clue tokens we're going to be making, so red may be doing some investigating, but its focus is going to be more on both actively sacrificing artifacts and triggering off of sacrifice artifacts so that when you sacrifice a clue token, it does something. So, investigate. Oh, is this not going to carry over? Try to make this readable, but bear with me. Investigate, sack artifacts, and clues. The last thing is going to be gates, and similar to investigate, red's going to care more about sacrificing gates than having them or playing them or doing something positive with them. It's a lot of overlapping, but that's something that playtesting will tell us whether there's too much of that. So sacrificing gates. All right. So now that we've got kind of these three mechanical focuses, we're going to be going through one by one all of the mechanical space that is primary in red that is listed on the Mechanical Color Pie 2017. Like I said, I formatted this for my own purposes so it's easier for me to see. I have all of my primary red abilities just listed nice and easily. So let's go through them one by one. This is how we tackle making these batch commons. We're just going to go through each one of these abilities one by one, figure out is there an interesting way that this can interact with one of our naming mechanics or some of the mechanical space that the set is playing in. So first, basic land counting. That's not really doing much. It doesn't show up all that much in general. Generally, red will want you to count the number of mountains you have. Because the set already has a focus on gates, we're not going to be playing in that space right now. Can't be countered. That's not something that's normally going to show up at higher rarities in red. Again, not something for commons, not something for this. Same with copying permanents. We're not going to want to copy permanents even temporarily. Although, what will happen is, while you're making commons, sometimes you'll come up with an idea for a good uncommon. So I'm going to write this new card down because, hey, it's interesting. I'm going to mark it as uncommon, but target artifact you control becomes a copy of another target UEOT. So we're going to turn artifacts we control, but in this set, clues, into another type of artifact. It lets us change a clue into something else, and that can be a lot of fun. Not appropriate for common, but still a cool card. And this is going to happen a lot while you're designing commons. You'll start making commons, and you're like, wow, that's a really cool idea, but there's no way that's a common. So we're going to run into a lot of those. Write them down because you're also making uncommons and rares. All right. Next, +N+O on creatures, spells, auras, your team one-shot, your team ongoing. Okay, all of those are very popular effects. Let's make one of these on a spell. Red gets a bunch of combat tricks at common because red does not have a tremendous amount of depth when it comes to common spells. There's 2 damage spells, there's 2 combat tricks. Let's make one of them now. All right, so what can we do with this that's going to play up one of our set mechanics? Haunt doesn't really matter the way we want to use it. Investigate can, so can gates. We can say target creature gets +N+O, and if you sacrifice an artifact when you cast a spell, it gets an additional +N+O. Excuse me, just adjusting. All right. So I like that one actually. It could be a gate, but we don't want to give too many incentives for sacrificing lands. This was a mistake that was made in Prophecy. If you incentivize your audience to do it, they will, and they will regret it. So, our first red spell will be target gets, let's call it +2/+0. +0, UEOT. If you sack artifact, additional +1/+0, and trample or first strike or menace. Any of the red evergreen abilities works. I'm going to say trample here. It's probably overlapping a little too much with green, but it's safe to do in red and it's more meaningful. So we'll do trample here. All right, good. One spell down. Deal end to target creature or player. Now that's any target or any subset of targets because we've separated the Planeswalker redirection rule. That's another great spell. We've already done our investigate one. Let's trigger this one off of gates. Maybe not sacrificing it. Maybe we can lock it down. There's a few different options we can take with this. I'm so hesitant to play it. I wrote down sacrificing gates for the red mechanical space and gates. I'm thinking that might not be the best place because sacrificing lands is just so iffy, but let's take a look anyway. All right. Let's make it a bolt for 2. Instant, 3 damage to target creature or PW. You may tap a gate you control, tap, and exert. So we're going to shorthand this here. When we actually template it, we will write it out a little further. But for right now, we're just going to lock down one of our gates to do an additional 3 to the creature Planeswalker's controller. To its controller. Fine. All right. Red gets another spell. This one's going to be a sorcery. This one will probably be higher cost, not as utility, something basic. We're probably just going to shoot some to the face. Yeah, we're probably just going to make a lava axe variant. Sorry, I don't normally come up with numbers on this, but with red, you kind of want to do the numbers. Let's just for now say damage to PW or player and some artifact related bonus. All right, we can figure out what that means. Maybe it could be as an additional cost. We could do a lightning axe variant where it costs a little bit, but you have to sacrifice an artifact as an additional cost. That's probably the way to do it. So lightning, sack artifact, or pay more. Great. All right, 3 spells down. We gotta start doing some creatures. All right, so one more thing that we can do is set up a damage dealing creature that either does some damage when it hits or leaves the battlefield. 3 commons that do direct damage is a little much, but it gives us some wiggle room and also starts letting us create some creatures, which we are so far sorely missing. All right, so let's make a... I like a leaves the battlefield creature that also haunts. Or maybe enters the battlefield, damage, leaves the battlefield, haunt. That might be pushing the line between common and uncommon, but I think that makes for an interesting creature. So ETB Shock, LTB Haunt, which will kind of really make a very strong utility for reds punishing things that are haunted. All right, fine. Let's call that the end of the damage dealers, and let's move on to other things. Fine. Down our list, sacrifice a creature and deal damage equal to its power toughness. We're not going to do that. Enough stuff doing damage so far. Deal end damage to more damage. Gonna skip that. Direct damage, multiple targets. Skip that. Double strike. Double strike only really shows up at uncommon. We're not going to bother with it. Extra attack only shows up at rare. As you can see, the mechanical space to mine at common is very, very narrow. It's very focused in on damage. Now, damage is a very deep ability. It does a lot of different things, but when you're making these batch commons, they end up feeling very similar to each other unless you kind of force yourself to explore newer areas. Okay. Forced attack. Target creature attacks this turn if able, or a forced block. Target creature must block this turn if able. Those are very, that's a strong overlap in blue, and why not? Let's do it. Those in red are typically attached to spells. You know, I much prefer to make a panic card than either of those things, so I'm going to skip over them for now. When they're done in red, they typically are done at higher rarities. I think we're just going to skip those in favor of a panic effect. Freeze a land. Now, they played around with this a little bit in Shadow's Block. They may have done some of it in Amonkhet, but I don't think they did. Not Amonkhet. Kaladesh. I don't think it's been done since Shadow's Block, but it's still a valid place to play, and it beats destroying a land, particularly in a set that has gates. So we don't necessarily want to make a gate hoser at common. Actually, maybe we do. So let's destroy lands. Why not? Well, let's freeze lands because land destruction is particularly brutal when it's pushed at common, and freezing land was kind of their compromise in that regard. So let's freeze a land and punish it for being a gate. I like that. So this will be a sorcery because these things are done at sorcery unless we attach it to a creature. We can attach it to a creature. There's nothing wrong with attaching freezing a land to a creature. It has to be costed appropriately. Let's do it on a creature. Fine. ETB freeze land. If that land was a gate, we're going to punish them by obviously doing damage to them. If that land was a gate, yeah. 2/2, it's controller. All right. Next up, haste. That is an evergreen ability. So one thing we could do with the evergreen creature abilities when doing these kind of batch commons is to figure out if there's a way to kind of meld them with our set's keywords. So our red creatures aren't really going to be investigating all that much, nor are they going to really care all that much about playing gates, but haunt could be interesting. If we just have a haunt creature that, sorry, if we just have a hasty creature that haunts on death, that helps us because red wants to punish the haunted creatures, at least in, you know, my version of these commons. So, creature, haste, haunt. Now we can do one of two things. We can have a, when the haunted creature becomes haunted, it does something to them, or we could just leave it as a haunt, which is kind of like this pseudo enchantment that hovers around the creature waiting for other things to care about it. Because it's common, common's pulling us in two different directions. It wants us to be simple, but it also doesn't want us to have cards that don't necessarily do something with their abilities. So we can say that when it haunts a creature, there's a limited range of rewards that we can do. Doing a combat-related reward isn't great, so things like giving our own creatures haste or power boost or something like that isn't especially helpful, because most of the time that this creature is going to be haunting something, it will be in the context of having died in combat. It's not always the case, but again, we don't want to lead players down to kind of corner cases. We want the obvious thing to be the thing that they want to do with it. So instead of rewarding our creatures for being haunted, we're going to punish those creatures for being haunted. And so we're going to say creatures haunted by this thing. What can red do that will punish a creature on an opponent's side? We can, it doesn't really make them lose abilities, that's a blue thing. It doesn't really give them -N effects, that's a black and a blue thing. Must attack, there we go. Must attack if able. That's a great one. Creatures haunted by this thing must attack if able. That's a great haunt ability. Alright, 3 creatures, 3 spells. Let's keep going. Did we skip over first strike? That seems like it was not smart of us. Alright, another creature. Whenever you sack artifact, first strike, you EOT. Land destruction, we're going to skip that because we did the land freezing mana production temporarily. That is fun and potentially dangerous and probably uncommon, but we're going to do it anyway. Dominari just came out. I think they reprinted some. Oh no, they reprinted the one that sacrifices a goblin. I'm thinking of the one from Mirrodin that I'm considering for my cube, Kark Clan Engineers or something, that lets you sacrifice an artifact for 2 red. Let's say we'll sacrifice an artifact for 2 red. Why not? T sac artifact add RR. Nope, not too many R's. We want this to stay common. It's probably not a common anyway, but we'll try it out. That lets us kind of sacrifice our clues for nefarious purposes. Menace. Creatures want to have menace. We could also make a menace combat trick. Did we make more than one combat trick? We did not. You know, I'm going to pull up Gatherer, or Scryfall really, and see if this is a card that's been made. This is another great resource to take a look at. If you're not familiar with Scryfall, get familiar with Scryfall, because frankly, it is amazing. Alright, let's move this down so you guys can see what I'm typing in here. Scryfall. We are going to be looking for creatures you control and menace. So has there been a spell that gives creatures you control menace till end of turn? I know there's an enchantment that was recently reprinted. There it is, Goblin War Drums. Let's look particularly for sorceries. And I don't think there is. So let's make a sorcery that gives all of our creatures menace. That sounds fun. Sorcery, creatures you control, okay. Menace, VOT. Perfect. Alright, as you can see, we're, most of the, well, about halfway through our list of abilities, and we've got a fair amount of creatures. We got 5 creatures and 5 spells. We were looking for, what, 8 creatures, 7 spells, so 5 more cards. Perfect. Panic. Now this was an effect that I decided we were going to do earlier. red is going to want to, well, red is going to want to have some additional evasion, and we really just did that with the menace sorcery. Now we could change our hasty creature to have an enter the battlefield ability that will cause a panic. Target creature can't block this turn. But that creature's already getting a little full up. And with this menace sorcery, it really plays in the same space. It's limiting their ability to block, particularly when we went as wide with that as we did. So I'm going to hold off on that. All right, so impulsive draw, which is for some reason written out as playing cards off the top of the library for free. Oh no, it's because it's a different ability. That's a rare ability. We're not doing that. Polymorph, also a rare ability. Not doing that. Punisher effects. It has to be a set theme for us to really want to do it. It's one of those things that you want to appear at least in some kind of cycle, either vertical or, typically a vertical cycle because it's really a red ability. We're not going to go there. Random destruction effects, not something I'm interested in doing this time. Rummaging, that's a good one. We could definitely use some rummaging. I think we're going to so card draw in a set with investigate is often replaced by our clue tokens. So I think that we're probably going to want to tie the rummaging to investigate. So, as an additional cost to cast this, discard one card from your hand, discard another card from your hand, and investigate twice. This will do a couple of things for us. It gives us more artifacts to play with, which is something that red is playing up, but also works in the same space as that rummaging ability. It would probably be cost very cheaply. It would probably cost us at 1 red, but we'll get to that later. I like this because it's a very set-specific way to approach rummaging. So sorcery, additional, discard a card, investigate twice. All right, so going over our spell list, we currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spells and 0 auras. Usually every color gets an aura at common. It's one more thing for them to do, so we're going to give something that helps our creatures at common. These do not have to be especially flashy. And it might be useful to create another trigger that plays into our effects. So we can do some more sacrificing gates. I don't want to do that. I think we've done enough stuff with sacrificing artifacts and investigating for red. Let's do one more haunt mechanic. So aura, enchanted creature gets, I don't know, +2/+2, and it's either going to be menace or first strike or haste in a very rare situation. I don't like haste on auras for a variety of reasons, so let's call it first strike. Right? I don't think we did any first striking stuff yet, did we? We did not. So it's going to be just first strike. It'll be +2/+0, and when dies, it haunts. Okay. Just another thing for red to start playing with haunt abilities. Red's not rewarding you for having it, but it will punish you on occasion. Now, knowing that, is there a lot of stuff that is actively punishing things, or is that going to be relegated to uncommon? I don't think there is. So let's make a creature that gets a bonus if it is blocking or blocked by a haunted creature. When blocking or blocked by haunted creature, we can give it first strike. We can give it menace doesn't mean anything, haste doesn't mean anything. First strike is really the only option we have here. And there is a lot of overlap with that and our enchantment that we just created, but they can be thematically linked because one will kind of trigger the other. Let's play with it for now. We can always adjust later or let Adam and Bradley do the work when they get to it. So when blocking or blocked by a haunted creature, first strike, UEOT. Really going to discourage blocking by haunted creatures. All right, so we are up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 creatures. That's 2 shy of where we want to be, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spells. That's 1 short of where we want to be. We're in good shape here. So going down the rest of our list, we already did some sacrificing artifact stuff. We're not going to return sorceries from the graveyard to our hand. Red does not mess with the graveyard unless the set wants it to. This set does not especially want us to, so we're not going to do that. Sacrificing a permanent. We're doing enough of that. Spell copying is not common. Spell redirection is not common. Stealing permanents is not common. Wheeling is not common. We've really run out of stuff to do. That said, there's still a few more things that we can go through. Now, when I set up my own sets, before I do this step, before I start making bulk commons, I start thinking about different cycles that I want to show up because it's some easy cards to kind of fill in. They played around with cycles before when designing the Castmire stuff, but I decided that I wanted to do a cycle of spells that cares whether the bottom card of your library matches the color of the spell. So I just made a blue counter spell that did it. I made a green something that did it. Let's make a red spell that cares about the bottom card of your library. Now, we already did that kind of mass menace before. So we can either add this to that, which is an option, or we can kind of look at some of the other abilities that we ignored. Must attack is a red creature ability that you put on your own creatures to make them cost less. But the forced attack, I like. I like the idea of forcing a creature to attack and then doing something else if we have it. So let's call it an instant because we're going to be playing it during your opponent's turn. Instant target creature must attack this turn. Able. Check bottom if red. Bottom card, want to specify that. Library if red. We're going to do something else. Now, there's a limit to what we can do to our opponent's creatures in red if it's not damage. We can't take away abilities, like I said. We can't make them lose stats. That's not really things that happen. So let's figure out a way to punish the creature that's attacking or get some additional utility out of this. Red can technically cantrip. That's not an ability we want on this. We can also just give one of our creatures first strike till end of turn, but we've got a lot of cards that are doing that. So we're really running out of space to play here. Maybe we could investigate. We could investigate. That's definitely something that we can do. Yeah, why not? If red, investigate. So it's not it's almost a cantrip, but a really bad cantrip, which is fine, not a problem. All right, we are now at capacity for spells, I think, right? We have 7, so we need 2 more creatures. What just happened? Why are those on? Stop it. Okay. 2 more creatures. We have ETB Shock, we have ETB Freezing Land, Haste and Haunt. We can do a must attack each turn. That lets us make a cheaper creature. Must attack. Now, is there a way that we can have it benefit from any of our set's abilities? Not especially. It doesn't play it very well with Haunt, doesn't play especially well with Investigate, and doesn't play especially well with Gates. Now, I did limit what each of these abilities is doing, but that doesn't mean that we can't do other things with them. So for instance, I didn't really do anything with, landfall for Gates or tapping for mana from Gates or number of gates you control contribute to this. Just because I wanted to relegate that to, I think, a black and green were the other colors that do gates in this set. But it's not, we're not locked into that. So there is other mechanical space to play into. As you saw with Investigate, I didn't just have sacrificing artifacts or clues. I had cards that actually investigated, not many and not efficiently, but they existed. I don't think I want an ETB Investigate for this. I think that really doesn't feel great, but it might, well, actually, that could be an interesting card. Let's make this. ETB Investigate, must attack as long as you control a clue. That is the kind of card that tells a good story. It's telling a story of somebody who just absolutely is compelled by this mystery that exists and has to, as long as there are clues around, has to attack. We can put it on a low toughness creature to incentivize you to either be very aggressive or to use those clues and get rid of your artifacts. I don't know whether it's going to care specifically about clues or artifacts in general, but either way, that's something. All right, 7 creatures in. 1 more creature to go. In my own sets, I typically do at least 1 cycle of vanillas, 1 cycle of French vanillas. That's not what I'm doing today because I don't think that's particularly helpful for instructing on how to make these commons. That's more or less the filler that I have in my own sets. They do things. It's, 1 more step to take, but it's not something I'm doing for this particular exercise. Maybe if I ever start doing my own set design through this video series, we'll talk about it. All right, we need 1 more creature. I really like where that must attack creature ended up. I think maybe for our last one we'll do some gate counting. I don't think we want to do Gatefall particularly, although that's an option. So Gatefall would be landfall for gates whenever a gate enters the battlefield under your control effect, ability word. But not really an ability word because we're not doing that for gates. But maybe if you control 2 or more gates, it gets some kind of, I think that's the way to do it. Control 2 or more gates, some kind of bonus. As long as 2 plus gates, plus N, plus O. And that's it. So I'm going to wrap it up there for today. The next video will be kind of the continuation of this, where I show you how to take these 15 card concepts that we came up with and convert them into actual cards. I was originally going to do it all as one video, but this ran much longer than I thought it would, which is fine. I'm very happy to do it, but I think that turning what should have been what I envisioned as a 15-minute video into an hour and a half probably isn't what I want to be doing at this point. So we have our 15 card concepts, and the next time we talk, I'll be showing you how to turn those into actual cards. All right, thank you very much for joining me. Some contact information is below. Tell me what kind of videos you want to see in the comments. I'm really kind of making this up as I go along. I have all sorts of projects that I run over at Goblin Artisans. I'm very interested to hear what kind of lessons, what kind of exercises you guys really want me to run through. I've been designing cards for a long time. I think I'm pretty good at it. I enjoy it. I love doing it, and I'm very interested in kind of continuing this series. So let me know. And for now, that's it. So thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.